So we're starting a new series called Whitespace. And I know it's a little tricky with the title, and I need to do some explaining. But first, let me ask you guys 3 questions. Don't answer quite yet. Let me just put them out there, and you can kind of wrestle with them. And at the end of the 3 questions, you can say whether you identify with that or not. And the first question is, how many of you guys would say that you occasionally or often feel pretty stressed? Don't raise your hands yet. Don't raise your hands. How many of you would say that you occasionally or often feel financial tension or stress? And I'm curious, how many of you would say that you're like, man, I really wish that I had either more time for myself because I don't have enough time for me and to do the things that I need, or that I wish I had more time to spend with the people that I love? How many of you would say that you're one of those 3? Let me see some hands. Okay, quite a few of you, all right? I would say if everybody was being honest, everybody would raise their hand. Now, why is that? Why is that then? Why is it? Why is it that we have financial stress? Why is it that we feel like we don't have time? Why is it that there's this constant pressure of us being worried and upset about so many things? Well, in large part is because we live in a culture, right, that has pushed us to where we have no limits in our lives, right? Our culture constantly tells us, buy more, do more, accomplish more, conquer more. Not only more, but you deserve more, right? And we've talked about this before. It blows my mind how when somebody feels like they're blessed or they got something, it's like, I deserve this. And we bought into the I deserve this thing that has pushed us to where there is no margin, there is no breathing room in our lives, there is no white space in our lives. I would argue that most of us are living at an unbiblical and unsustainable pace in our lives. It's insane what normal has become in our culture. And those of us that call ourselves Christ followers usually don't look much different than the rest of our culture. So much so that our kids, right, they 7, 8 years old, right, on top of homework, on top of school, they're out 4 or 5 nights a week doing all kinds of things, doing activities on top of what they have to do on the weekend. Many of us, right, the schedules that we have imposed on our children have been imposed upon us. So they're stressed out and we're stressed out. If someone said to you, probably, right, are you enjoying life? I think most of us would be like, no, and I don't have no time to talk about it. I got to go. Virtually everyone I know has very little margin, very little breathing room, very little white space for error in the major areas of their life. See, most people have no white space, no margin, no breathing room for the most important things in life. Now, some of you may be saying, what in the world is white space? Well, let me give you a working definition of what we're going to be talking about in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And that is that white space is the amount available beyond what is necessary. When I first gave the title to somebody, I was like, I'm thinking about doing a series on white space. They were like, what do you mean? Okay, just think about white space, right? Think. This is the image that came to mind. It is that, that place where everything is just filled. By the way, that's someone from our church. That's a model within our church, right? I won't tell you who, but they don't have no hair. And they look very sexy with that hoodie. That's for Waukegan hoodie, by the way. But those are all words. Those are all words, right? And everything gets filled, and usually we don't have no margin. We don't have no white space. Our lives are filled. Finances to the limit, right? Emotional stress to the limit. Schedule to the limit. There is no white space. There is no breathing room. There is nowhere where we can just breathe and listen. Listen to our bodies. Listen to our souls. Listen to our grief and our pain that is there, that we have numbed it by just being busy and pushing ourselves. There is no white space. So white space is the amount, right, that you have left over after what is necessary. For instance, it is saying that you have 30 minutes to get somewhere. That takes you 20 minutes, and now you have 10 minutes of breathing room, 10 minutes of margin, 10 minutes of white space. There's nothing there. There's room, there's buffer, right? If I have $100 and I have $80 worth of bills, I have $20 worth of margin, of breathing room, of white space. Now, how does white space play out in everyday life? Well, it's this margin, right? It's showing up to meetings 5 to 10 minutes early so that you're not stressed out all the time. I know for some of you, you're like, it's part of my DNA. No, it's not. Some of you are like, man, if I show up on time, I'm there. Like, if it starts at this time and I'm there at this time, no, you still stress. What if you showed up 5 to 10 minutes early and you're not stressed? When somebody gets in the way and is driving slow, you're not freaking out and you're not cursing at them because you got 5 to 10 minutes breathing room, right? But no, we push everything to the limit, right? If I know it takes me 2 minutes to get there, I'm going to leave a minute and a half before I got to be there. That's our culture, right? White space or margin in our finances will be having money left over at the end of the month. Some of you guys are thinking, what is that? I've never heard of that. Let me explain it to you, okay? It means that what you get paid for that month, that at the end of that month, you actually still have money left over from what you made that month. It's a life-changing concept. Right? White space or margin is having distance between you and temptation, right? Rather than being morally on the edge. How far can I push this? Where is the sin? If the sin is right there, I'm going to be right there because I'm not stepping over. No. There's no margin. There's no buffer, right? So it's so easy to go over. We have no margin, white space, breathing room with temptation. It's having the emotional capacity that when your kid comes to you and drops on you an issue, you don't unleash on them. You don't go off on them because emotionally you have the ability to handle another struggle. Right? White space could be having 3 to 4 nights a week with nothing on your schedule. That doesn't mean you don't do anything, but it means that it's not already taken up. White space could be having extra time and extra money to invest in the people and in the things that you dearly love. And again, white space, the concept is to have the ability to think, to reflect, to meditate, to dream, and to listen. To listen. To listen to our souls, but most importantly, to listen to God. Listen, I really believe that many of us believe in God. We do. But we don't know God. We believe in the concept of God, but we don't know God because we have not learned to hear His voice. We have not paused long enough to allow God to be God in our lives because we're running around like crazy, being gods for our own life, being in control of everything and controlling everybody around us instead of creating enough space to allow God to be God. When we take a look at this story that we've read so many times, and many of you guys know it, it's found in Luke 10, and it's the story of 2 sisters, Martha and Mary. And I've read this story so many times, and yet once again, as I studied this week, it impacted me in a different way. We're going to take a look at 2 ladies that they both had the same opportunity to create space in their lives. And one chose to do it and one chose not to. So let's pick up the story in verse 38 of chapter 10 of Luke. It says this: as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named, who? Martha, that's our first character, opened her home to him. She had a sister named Mary, right? Who sat where? Where was Mary at? She sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he had to say. But Martha, which is, I believe, 95% of us were Marthas, to include me. But Martha was what? Distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. What's so interesting to me about this is that she wasn't distracted by bad things. She wasn't distracted by sinful things. She was just distracted with good things. But Mary chose the better thing instead of the good thing. And see, here's what I strongly believe. I believe that we are so consumed chasing the good things in life that we're actually missing out on the best things in life. Because we are so consumed chasing the good life, we're actually missing out on a great life. Mary, she created the room, right? She most likely had things to do. She probably had laundry that needed to get done, but yet she chose to sit at the feet of Jesus. She probably had groceries to get done, but she chose to sit at the feet of Jesus. She said, I'm going to embrace this moment and enjoy Jesus. But Martha, which is like most of us, on the other hand, she's distracted. She's freaking out, right? Now, what's interesting, though, is that I think that most of us would be distracted if we were in their case, too. I think very few of us would say, you know what, I'm just going to go and chill at the feet of Jesus. Most of us are like Martha. We're like, Jesus is in my house. I heard he's the Son of God. I better pick everything up. I better light up some candles. The best hand towels better be in the bathroom, right? She is hooking the place up. It's Jesus. So she's consumed with a whole bunch of good things. She's preparing the food, right? And Mary's just sitting at the feet of Jesus. It says that Martha was distracted with good things, but it kept her from the best thing. Someone said this, and I truly believe this now more than ever. I believe this with all my heart. It said, if Satan, our spiritual enemy, cannot get us to be really, really bad, he would just try to make us really, really busy. Some of us, we become so busy with the lesser things of life that we're completely missing out on the most important things in life. We're distracted from the very best because we're consumed with the good. You know, I went on vacation, as you guys know. I went to Costa Rica, and I was with my family, and for like 4 days, I couldn't relax. For 4 days, I was like, if I didn't have anything to do, I felt like something was wrong. I felt like I needed to be doing something. I needed to clean something. I needed to do something. How can I just be? It took me 3 to 4 days to finally feel relaxed and be like, oh, it's okay not to work. It's okay not to be consumed. It's okay not to check my phone. It took that long. It took that long. See, many of us, we're consumed, we're obsessed, we're possessed with accomplishing the urgent, right? What we think is important, and we're missing on the most important things in life. See, Mary and Martha, they're in this same situation, and this is hilarious. Let's pick up the story in verse 40 now. In the middle of verse 40, this is Martha coming to Jesus. It says, I love this, and I think this is most of us, right? Like I said, I think most of us are Martha. This is what it says. It says, Lord, so she's speaking to Jesus. It says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? And then she has the audacity to tell Jesus what to do. Right? She is giving Jesus orders. She says, tell her to help me. Man, I don't know about you, but I think we do that quite a bit. We're consumed. We're busy. We have no margin. We have no white space. We're frustrated. We're worried. We're upset. And when we approach Jesus, it's not to be at his feet. It's to tell him what he needs to do because life is so unfair. Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. It's crazy, right? She's saying, this is important, right? There's a lot going on. My sister's just there being lazy. How can that be? Jesus, take my side. And therein lies the greatest challenge of me doing this series, is that when I talk about this, Most of you are going to be convinced that there's just no other way that we can do life in our current day than the current pace that we do life at. You're going to think, well, this is nice. That's nice. But really, I need to live this way in order for me to succeed and do well in life. You're convinced with everything in you that this is what truly matters. And it's completely necessary to be successful in this world. Forgetting the fact, though, that the Bible says, the broad is the road and wide is the path that leads to destruction, and many people are on it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and few people find it. See, that's why Paul's words in Romans are so important to our culture. This is what Paul wrote 2,000 years ago in the book of Romans. He says, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of what? Of this world. To the pattern of what culture dictates life should be. It says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, right? This world that says that busyness is where you get your worth and where you get your success. It says, but, be transformed by the renewing of what? Of your mind. In other words, allow the Holy Spirit to renew the way the life should be in God's kingdom and not in our kingdom, right? Then it goes on, it says, then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. See, here's the issue. I think many of us have absolutely no idea what God's will for our life or for our family is. None. Because we've created no space in our life to be still and to allow Him to be God, and to allow Him to speak to us through His Word, to allow Him to speak to us even through the pains and the hurts that we're feeling, that we just rather suppress instead of allowing them to speak to us. It says, then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. And check out how it describes His will. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. We're going to be talking about this in the next coming weeks, and it's going to rock some of you. Most of you, though, quite honestly, I knew as I was preparing this, many of you guys are just going to shake this off and go on about your business. You're going to say, yeah, that's kind of nice. I'll think about it, right? I'll make some minor adjustments. Well, I'm not pushing for minor adjustments because you guys are bright and you're smart. If minor adjustments will fix your life, you would have done that long time ago. I'm talking about radical, life-altering decisions. Because I'm convinced with all my heart that the way that most of us are doing life is completely contrary to what God had planned for us. It's like Martha saying, Jesus, tell her to help me, right? I'm right. She's wrong. She's lazy. By the way, I just want to pause real quick. What I'm talking about having margin in our life, it doesn't mean that we don't work hard. It does not mean that we don't work hard. It just means that we put limit so that we are not driven by the things that we do, but we do what drives what is going on in our hearts. And there's a huge difference. So in fact, Scripture is very clear about us not being lazy. It says, hey, if you're lazy, you don't get to eat, right? So we work hard, but there's limits. There's rhythms in life. We can't just go without margin, right? There's a lot of stuff going on here, and this is real life, right? This is messy. This is complicated. All that is true, but we need to create space and margin where we can breathe, where we can listen, where we can grieve, where we can grow. So Jesus says this to Martha, right? Because Martha has this production mindset, and she's missing the point. She's missing. Jesus is right there, and she's missing the moment. This is verses 41 and 42. This is Jesus answering Martha. Martha, Martha. The Lord answered, you are what? Worried and what? And upset about many things. You know what? I think that describes most of the people in our culture. We're worried and we're upset about many things. because we have no margin, because we have no white space, because we have no breathing room, we are worried and upset about many things. But check it out. This is what Jesus says. He goes on. He says, but only one thing is needed. What is that one thing? What do you guys think? What is that one thing? It's Jesus. Is Jesus and being present before him. Was Martha present to Jesus? Was she listening to Jesus? No. In fact, she was telling Jesus what to do. Many of you guys come to church, and I've done this before. I come to church to tell Jesus what to do, not to be at his feet, not to be in his presence, not to worship him. I'm here to tell you what I need, Jesus. And I showed up. I got up early. I showed up. You better hook me up. But Jesus says that's not the way it works. He says, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen not what is good. Mary has chosen what is what? Better. See, Martha was not choosing bad. She was just choosing what is good. And Jesus is saying, I want to offer you what is better, not just what is good. I created you for what is better. I didn't create you for what is good. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Wow. Here's what you need to understand. The choice is yours. Some of you guys you're stressed out financially. Some of you guys are stressed out relationally. Some of you guys are just stressed out because you don't sleep, right? Some of you guys are stressed out because you got 100 things that you're trying to control. And Jesus is just saying, just come to my feet. This is the one thing that you need. Let me teach you the rhythms of life according to me. And I know what some of you guys are thinking, especially those of you that don't know me well. You're thinking, Carlos, you just don't understand, man. You only work one day a week anyway, right? You don't know what real work is like. You don't know what it's like to have financial pressure. Listen, let me tell you, I wasn't always a pastor, all right? I did 10 years in the Air Force, and I even worked it corporately. And I never got paid so much to do so little. For real. Right? My job never ends. I can change my schedule, and I'm flexible. But when you guys have issues, if it's at 2 o'clock in the morning, who are you calling? Right? My work never ends. So don't give me this, oh, you don't understand. Yes, we all have a choice to make, and we don't allow other people's lack of limits become our limits. We create that. And Jesus teaches us a rhythm in which we can live life out of abundance instead of being worried and upset about many things. I want you to just be honest with yourself right now, okay? Because I was honest with myself this week. And this is just as much for me as it is for any of us. I thought about, what am I worried and upset about? And here's the worst part. You know what the problem is? That what do we say is the most important thing above all? Is family. Like, I love my kids. I love my family. But the problem is that we're worried and upset about many things. Our family gets the worst of it. Our family gets frustration. Our family gets the leftovers of anything good that is within us. So we chase the good things at the expense of the most important things in life. So what are you worried and upset about? See, I know that this is obvious, but let's just put this out there. What happens when we live a white space-less life? What happens when white space decreases? What happens when margin decreases? What happens when breathing room decreases? Two things, two critical things happen. And the first one is this. The first one is that when white space decreases, your stress increases, right? That's why Martha was worried and upset. right? When white space decreases, your stress increases. You know, it's amazing. If you think about the people closest to you and how you speak to them, the tone in which you speak to them, the way in which you give them love, affection, the way that you interact with their needs and their hurts and their pains, it's a direct connection with how worried and upset and the pace of your own life is. See, it's impossible to live a marginless life and be kind and be there for your loved ones and be loving to them. It's impossible. What happens is stress increases when we have no margin. Because what happens? When we don't have no margin financially, something breaks, now you're stressed out and you got two problems. One is that whatever broke. And the second is that how in the world are you going to pay for it now? So it produces more stress. Over and over, not just financially, but in every way, right? So, when we don't have white space in our lives, stress increases. And the second thing is your relational intimacy decreases. We see this all the time, right? Those of you that are busy, those of you that are frustrated, those of you that are worried and upset, right? Your mind rarely disengages. That's where you can be present with somebody and not be present. Have you ever done that? Right? You're there with that person, but you know they're not really there. Because their mind has not disengaged. You can't fully be present. And here's the problem. If we can't be fully present to the people we have in front of us, it is impossible for us to be fully present before God. Impossible. That's how I felt at the beginning of my vacation. I was like, what in the world is wrong with me? Right? I'm in Costa Rica. I'm in paradise. How come I can't just allow myself to be fully present to this paradise? My mind was engaged. I don't know how many of you guys have paid attention enough once you get to a restaurant and you're not on your phone and you look around and you could see families, complete families, sitting around a table with every one of them on their phones. Every one of them. Mom, dad, kids. It's our choice. And for those of you that have kids that are under 15 years old, it's your choice that your kid is doing that. Oh, but you don't understand. They're. No. You're the parent. They're not. See, here's the thing. Many of us, because we don't know how to be still, we feel like we always need to be busy. And when we actually have space, we fill it with technology. We just fill it with technology. Whether it's phone, whether it's Netflix, whether it's YouTube, whether it's social media, we don't know how to not be engaged. We don't know how to have breathing room. So the moment that we have any time to spare, we are engaged with technology. And we're fully present to technology instead of being fully present to the very people that we're called to love. Guys, there's something wrong with our culture. There's something wrong with the way that we're allowing ourselves to live a white, spaceless life. We're just too busy. We're too busy for people. We're too busy for God. At the end of the day, why do we do that? Why do we live this insane pace? Well, I wish I had more time, but it really comes down to idolatry. We elevate good things and we make them supreme. And we give these things the time that our family requires and our time with God requires, and even the time for ourselves require. So it's time to have a come to Jesus moment. This is what Jesus said in Matthew 11, and this is so beautiful. This is what Jesus is offering you, and he's offering me. Verses 28 and 29 say this. It says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, Let me just give you some fill in the blanks here of what this is also saying. It is saying, come to me, all who are stressed out, overwhelmed, and can't get it all done. Come to me, the single parent who is about to fall apart. Come to me, the business guy who feels like you're going to lose everything. Come to me, mom who has no white space for herself. Come to me, those who are overwhelmed and feel insignificant if they are not busy all the time. Come to me. Jesus says, let's go on with the verse. He says, come to me, and I will give you what? Rest. Rest. Rest for our souls. Rest for our mind. Rest relationally, emotionally. And we're not going to go into this, but actually Jesus gives us a promise that he will protect our thoughts and our hearts from anxiety and from worry if we sit at his feet. He tells us this in Philippians, right? He tells us, if you come to me, if you lay at my feet and bring your burdens before you, he says he will actually take guard. It's a military term, right? It will take guard and protect your heart and your mind. Jesus is offering this to us, but we're so busy, we completely miss it. He goes on. He says, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from who? From this world? Learn from the craziness of culture? Learn from social media? No. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart. And you will find what? Rest for your souls. The Bible says that you will find rest for your souls. Just think of that. Jesus is saying, I will give you peace, I will give you assurance, I will give you tranquility. He doesn't say, I will take your problems away. There's nowhere where he says that. There's nowhere where he promises that there won't be issues and hurt. Nowhere. In fact, he promises that there will be. But what he promises is that he will meet us in the midst of all of that. How is it possible that Jeremy, going through everything that he's gone through, and that video doesn't do justice to the reality of what Jeremy and Jennifer and the whole family has lived out. How can he possibly say a year into this, he still doesn't have a kidney, he still needs to do 10 hours a day of, transfusion of everything that's going on in his body, connected, right? He needs to do dialysis every single day. How can somebody that is going through that say, I wouldn't take this back? How is that possible? Well, when Jesus meets you in the midst of that, he gives you rest for your soul and for your mind, and allows you to be able to make the better things in life priority over the good things in life. See, I just got to be honest, but many of us are chasing that dollar at the expense of destroying everything good in your soul and at the expense of the relationships that are supposed to be the most important thing in your life. Listen, ultimately Jesus says this, or God says this in Psalms. He says, be still and know that I am God. It is impossible to let God be God in our lives if we have no margin. It is impossible. He says, be still and know that I am God. Well, let me just end with this. This is what we're going to be looking at in the coming 3 weeks. This is what God says in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, verse 11. He says, when we seek him, he says, the Lord will guide you always. Not culture, not the expectations of other people, not your boss. It says the Lord will guide you always. He, not the world, he will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. And rather than being parched and thirsty and empty and buried and worried and upset, he says this, he says, you will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. But you can't have that if you're chasing what's good at the expense of what is better. See, when you stop living according to the patterns of this world, but instead you live according to the rhythms of His grace, you and I will never be the same. So I just want to ask you to consider this for this week, all right? I want you to actually have an assignment and some homework. Yes, homework. That is that you take 5 minutes every day to just be still. You don't think, you don't produce, you don't do anything but be still before God and learn to hear and to listen. Maybe the first thing that you're going to do is to listen to some pain in your heart from 10 years ago that you haven't dealt with. But you've been going busy trying to numb it, and you haven't grieved. And because you haven't grieved, you've never healed. Just be still for 5 minutes before God. Allow Him to be God in your life. 5 minutes a day, that's it. 5 minutes a day. And then the second thing I want to ask is that you will consider plugging into a small group. There's actually going to be an opportunity for you guys to sign up for a small group right afterwards. Why? If we're talking about creating space, why in the world are you going to add something else? Because these are the two incredible things that we need to make space for. We need to make space for people, and we need to make space for God. And this is what I've learned. That unless you have the right people around you that are seeking to make space for God, it is impossible for us to do that journey by ourselves. We need people. We need people that are on the same journey, that are on the same struggle, and that are real enough to say, I need other people in order for me to live out the plan that God has for me and my family, and the plans that God even has for this community. So you guys can go. There's 3 options for you guys to plug into a small group. For you guys that are 20-somethings, there's a 20-something small group that you can be a part of. If you're like a late teen, very mature teen, you can be a part of that. If you're very mature 30-something, you can be a part of it as well. I'm only kidding. You're not allowed to come. So there's a 20-something small group that's available. There's also a men's small group. It's just men. And that is a great way, especially for us, that many of us are Hispanic and we have this ego thing. We don't talk about our issues. It's good to see other men that struggle with that and be like, how do we do this? How do we become the men that God created us to be? How do we get rid of all the junk the culture has told us we ought to be, so that we can truly be the warriors that we were created to be and to fight for the right things that we were created to fight for? So there's a men's small group, and then there's just regular small group that you can sign up for. So there'll be people outside in the information desk where you can plug in and just ask questions. You don't need to commit because you go there. You're just asking questions to see how you can get plugged in.